Hi, so we're joined here today by Ella, who's a co-founder and CMO at Scalable Capital.
Yes.
Hi Ella, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
You've come from finance originally, or consultancy, and you've then gone on to create a successful business in the e-commerce world. And I guess now you're at the stage where you've kind of brought your finance experience and your tech experience and joined the fintech world. Could you tell us a little bit about Scalable Capital at the moment?
Yeah, of course. I'm actually super excited about the project.
Yeah.
Because as the saying always goes, you should ideally found a startup that you are sort of the ideal customer for, so you really get the needs of your customers.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the case for me, because when I was still in consulting, I knew that I should invest my money in order to make it work for me for my retirement and so on. But I never really had time to do it on my own in what I felt was a really good way of doing it. Yeah, I ended up in the end holding a couple of different funds, or maybe buying some individual stocks that I personally really believed in.
Yeah.
But I knew that what I was doing was never going to be anywhere near perfect. And then unless you have £1 million or so, you really don't have a private bank that would want to do that for you, right? So I felt like there's really a gap in the market for people that definitely know that they should be investing and are sort of very smart in the way how they want to go about it, but really lack the time to do it themselves. So that's basically the gap that we are filling with Scalable Capital. Yeah? We basically offer dynamically adjusted portfolios, and what that means is that when a customer accesses our service and goes through the onboarding process, we're going to ask you a couple of questions around your time horizon for investment, for example, about your financial situation, your understanding of financial products as well. And then we're going to recommend a risk category for you. Yeah? So what we really offer is an institutional style approach to investment, but we offer it to retail customers. So what that means is that like 15 years ago or so, when also computational power was a lot more expensive, and running these simulations, they are very data intensive. When running those simulations cost a lot of money, because you would need tons of sort of mainframe computers. At that time, maybe a sovereign wealth fund with a couple of billions of money to invest would go to an investment bank and say, could you run a portfolio for me like that? Consistently monitoring the risk and making adjustments. And then they would have done that, and they probably would have charged way more than what we're charging actually now. But because of the cloud and cloud computing, we can run these simulations in a very cost-efficient way now. And that actually enables us to bring that kind of service to a retail investor, which I think is super exciting, because it's really technology at the heart of what we do, and enabling people to get, a better service, and at the same time at a lower cost. Which I
think Fintech is probably one of the biggest talking points on the agenda in London at the moment, and it seems to be probably the birthplace for a lot of firms, for a lot of fintech firms as well. Why do you think that is? I
think obviously London is sort of the financial center within Europe. And of course, you have like Frankfurt and you have Paris as well, for example, and they are also important. But London is sort of the core or the heart of finance in Europe. So I think naturally it will breed a lot of fintech startups as well, because a lot of the founders also in those companies do have a background in finance and in banking. That's how they came up with their ideas. Sometimes it's also required to get a license from the FCA to have people and founders on board that do have a very strong finance background expertise, because it's not easy or trivial to get the FCA license. So I think that's probably one of the reasons, you just have a lot of founders naturally here in London, because they come across those ideas through their existing jobs. And at the same time, I feel that the existing institutions, banks or insurances, are also quite excited about what's happening in the sector, and they also try to innovate. Naturally, sometimes they can't do that at the same speed as like a very small startup, but they are they're definitely very interested.
Do you think as well that it's got a lot to do with the fact that a lot of banks do see fintech growing as an industry anyway, and a lot of them are also investing heavily in fintech firms as well to start them out?
Yeah, you can see that there was a bit of a deal flow already in the industry, and some banks have set up either subsidiaries or they invest directly into some of what they think are the most promising fintech startups, yes. But apart from even the incumbents funding some of the new players, you just also have a very strong VC industry in London. And compared to some of the other places, definitely in comparison to Germany, where I know the landscape relatively well, I feel that VC investors here are a little bit more open to take real risks, as opposed to what I've seen in Germany. Sometimes some VCs might be more focused on like Me Too products that they've seen work successfully somewhere else already. Not that they're without risk, but it feels a little bit more comfortable looking at these business models and knowing they've worked in the US already or somewhere else. I feel like in Britain there's more of an openness to really radically new business models, and that obviously helps.
What would you say your most memorable work moment is to date?
It's really hard to tell because my team is really brilliant, and they all actually have a great sense of humor. So I think there were quite a few moments that were just hilarious, but I'm not sure I can share any of them. But I think one of the most like really memorable moments was definitely when we received the FCA license. Yes, because it just happened a couple of weeks ago, and we were really keen on getting going in the UK as well, because we'd already received the license for Germany, and it was just, I think, even more important for us as the London team than it was for the team in Munich maybe, because for us obviously a couple of activities we just couldn't kick off in the UK without the license. Like we weren't allowed to do any marketing, for example. We couldn't really launch the website. So I think when we got that call that finally we had the license, we were just all very happy.
What
so that
was
was
the
definitely very good.
Like in the office?
I think we got a cake to celebrate actually. So and I think we went out in the evening, to go for a drink after work. So but that was definitely a very good moment. Yes.
Yeah, that's brilliant. You've achieved a lot over the last few years, and I think it's really inspiring, not just for women, but for everyone out there. But I think a lot of people who've succeeded, or a lot of entrepreneurs or successful companies, always talk about their success stories, and they don't sometimes highlight kind of the setbacks. And I think it's important to call them setbacks, not failures, because I don't think there's anything as such.
I agree.
I'm just wondering, what were the biggest setbacks that you've faced and how you overcame them, really?
Yeah. So, first of all, I totally agree. Yeah, I think there's way too much talk about all the amazing success stories. Yeah, and then people get very depressed when they feel things aren't going well, and they think, as you say, they're failing. And I totally agree with you. I think you learn so much from situations where things don't go according to plan, and very often they don't. Right?
Yeah.
So I think my first startup is a very good example, because it really didn't work out the way I thought it would. And in hindsight, there are a lot of things that I would have done differently, obviously. But I'm just going to go briefly through what we did and what I think the learnings were. So it was a marketplace model, focused on one particular category, baby and kids products, which we thought was a very exciting category. And we had a partner in that domain, sort of the social media website basically for mothers, so very focused on our category as well. And we thought there would be a great sort of user benefit to basically aggregate, all the different shops in that category on one platform. The problem is, there's several problems to that model. The first one is your margins are very low. Like if you look at Amazon and you sell your products on Amazon, for example, as a marketplace seller, you would pay around, depending on the category, between 10 and maybe 15%. So you can't really, as a new player in any category, you can't ask for a lot more than Amazon, because obviously you don't have the distribution power of an Amazon. So you're going to be stuck with like 10 to 15% as a margin, which is not really enough to have very good marketing campaigns. So already there you have kind of an issue. And then the next problem is, and it's maybe even a bigger one, is you can't plan your assortment, because the assortment depends completely on the sellers you can basically get onto your platform. So it's a little bit random basically, because it depends on who you get to want to sell through you. So you can't plan. The assortment, you also don't really have an influence on the prices because the eventual sellers make the prices in a marketplace model. So there's always a risk that they will underbid you in their own shop, for example, but list their products with a higher price than yours. And eventually you just don't really own the customer relationship because you don't do the logistics, you don't do the last mile delivery, basically. You don't really see the customer sort of. But if things go wrong, the customer will still blame you because they purchased on your website. So I think there were a lot of problems, which is why now I would never do a marketplace model again. And maybe it depends on the category, to be fair, but for me the learning was I want to be the one who owns the product, who can make the product good, whether that's a service now or literally selling one product or several products, but I want to be the one who can define what exactly I'm going to sell to the customer. And have
more control, I guess,
over and have the full control. Yes. And then, I mean, in general, I'm very excited about Scalable as well in terms of the business model side of things, not just the product or the service we deliver to customers, because it's not an e-commerce model. And the beauty of that is that you can scale the business a lot more easily and you have a much lower cost base in the longer run. With e-commerce, you always have, you know, the assortment that very often you need to buy up front, for which you need a lot of capital, so you need to raise a lot of money as well. You have the warehousing costs, you have the logistics, you know, outbound logistics, reverse logistics, people return a lot of stuff, obviously. So all of that we don't have at Scalable Capital because it's a financial product. So in terms of a business point of view, that's something I really like. And I think some of the marketing providers, for example, out there, like a Criteo, for example, in retargeting, they've been hugely successful, and I think part of that is also that they don't have a physical product that they need to ship. They just offer a service, which sometimes in terms of the business can just make a lot more sense.
That's great. I think the important thing that I wanted to highlight there as well is obviously that hasn't worked out when you wanted to start up in a marketplace, but then you actually went on to have one of the most successful e-commerce websites out there. So
luckily not a marketplace though.
But you know, you've kind of learnt from what hasn't worked for you, and then you were able to make the changes and then try again, and you didn't just kind of say, well, the startup world's not for me, and kind of go back to the corporate job, which is admirable. The other thing that I wanted to highlight as well, recently in the Huffington Post you had a great article where you also talked a bit about your background. One of the questions that you answered were, if you were to give your younger self advice, what would it be? And you mentioned an interesting point about your PhD, and you know, you said that basically it's not a waste of time, but if you want to set up your own business or be an entrepreneur, then it is in that sense. I just wanted to ask you to explain a little bit more about that, because I think a lot of women or people in general can sometimes hold back from pursuing certain things like setting up their own companies, or you know, going for the top jobs just because they don't necessarily come from a strong academic background. And I just wondered if you wanted to give us a bit of background on that, and also a bit about what advice you would give those people as well.
So first of all, as you also said, I think it's not about saying, you know, a good academic background isn't worthwhile. I think the opposite is true. A great education is always the most important stepping stone. And also for me, for example, starting my career at McKinsey, you know, it really helped me to build a relevant network, learn a lot of things, obviously, about, you know, whatever, problem structuring, analyzing, solving problems, being very analytical about things, dealing with people, sort of very senior people as well. So all of that is something that I value a lot. I just think that a PhD in particular is a very theoretical, you know, research-intensive degree, obviously, and I feel that it's really more for people that want to pursue an purely academic career, like want to become a professor and teach, basically. So in Germany, where I was at the time, it's fairly common for people to do a PhD or a doctoral degree. And I think it's a little bit of a waste of time for them if they don't want to pursue that teaching or research career. And I feel it's very important that people understand what it's for, really. And a PhD or a doctoral degree is not going to help you be a better, entrepreneur or effectively even as a business person, you're not going to make better decisions because it's so specific what you write about in your PhD. So I also feel that, maybe in the past, like 30 years ago, it really helped to have that, doctor in front of your name, and it gave you a lot of respect. I think these days people just don't value it that much anymore. And anyways, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you don't need to impress, a big corporate employer. It's about a totally different type of challenge, that you're getting into. So I feel it didn't help for me. But I think on the other hand, what I feel is that even though women are actually being very well educated now these days, like I think I recently read a statistic that in Germany more than half of the university degrees, like new university degrees now, are being held by women, which I think is amazing. So women on average now, the new generation, they are better educated actually than men on average. I think nevertheless the problem with women is very often that they just are too insecure about themselves. And so that's one issue, I think, and the other issue is they don't really go into these, science, technology, engineering, math, physics subjects to the same level as men do. And I think it's not just related to their natural preference. I think part of it is probably also still related to education, how we grow up, what the media tell us in terms of, what like a successful, great woman should look like or what she should be doing. I feel if younger girls had a lot more, female engineers around them, or could see, whatever researchers winning a Nobel Prize or whatever in the press, more often, and not just sort of pretty actresses or models, I think they would probably, in the end, study these subjects, a lot more often. So I think in that sense, I think there's still quite a road ahead of us.
I do definitely think when they start young as well, they're kind of almost put into categories of girls should like only these subjects and boys tend to like these subjects, and I think it's best if everybody just kind of left children to decide what they like themselves, and then that way it'll encourage more girls to go into these subjects as well. And in terms of London, how does it compare to other countries that you've lived in?
I absolutely love London. I think it's a brilliant city. There's a lot of energy. I love the cultural scene. Like you can go to the theater and see. Like I just saw Ralph Fiennes in a theater play. A couple of months ago we saw Helen Mirren. I've seen Carey Mulligan in a theater play quite recently. So I missed Nicole Kidman, unfortunately, because I couldn't get tickets. But I mean, what other places do you have in the world where you can see, that caliber of actors? So I find that super exciting. They have brilliant exhibitions here. I'm very much into sort of art and design and fashion. And there was the Alexander McQueen exhibition, for example. But there are lots of smaller ones also that are very exciting. So that really keeps you on your toes. Basically. It makes you feel really guilty on the weekend if you don't go out and you're just watching Netflix. But so I love London for that. Obviously, if it could have the weather of Barcelona, for example, then I'd be really, really happy.
That'd be good. We're good with the art in the theatre, but if we could have the weather, please, that'd be amazing.
I mean, there's always something that could be better, but I'm very happy. And Moscow, for example, New York, they both have amazing summers. Better weather typically than London, but then they get really cold in winter as well. Moscow in particular, obviously, like minus 30 degrees, like really freezing. So that's, I don't know whether I would want to trade my slightly more stable London weather with the peaks that I have there, but I think it's a brilliant place. I think it's one of the best places in Europe for sure.
Brilliant. And what's your favourite spot in London at the moment?
I think in terms of where I love to go for drinks or brunch, for example, it's the Riding House Cafe on Great Titchfield Street. Very nice place. Lovely decor, super nice people, and it's always kind of buzzing. And it's a little bit, even though it's actually fairly close to Oxford Circus and Bond Street, and all of those in Oxford Street and so on, it's sort of far away. And it's kind of a niche type of street a little bit, so that you don't have throngs of tourists.
Exactly.
So I love that place. In Summer Regent's Park, I think is brilliant.
It's lovely.
I love, the setting around the lake and everything. It's just really beautiful. And they have these lovely little chairs there that you can rent. So very comfortable. I think it's great for the weekends. And otherwise, I think I'm just the person that hangs around in museums or galleries most of the time. So the Design Museum, for example, is one of my favorites.
Nice.
They have great exhibitions there typically. Yeah.
It's brilliant. And the Alexander McQueen at V&A was amazing as well. So.
Absolutely fantastic. I mean, the V&A is a huge museum. You can just go there any day just to watch the general exhibition. But they also have great special exhibitions. They had one on the different dresses of Lady Di some time ago. That was pretty cool as well. Or like a special wedding dress exhibition. They had an exhibition on Horst, a German photographer that worked with Vogue for a very long time. There was a great photo exhibition as well. Yeah. So the V&A, brilliant. Yeah. And what a great sort of location as well. The architecture is just stunning.
Absolutely. So, and hopefully you can have a tour around this place as well.
I mean, I'll definitely go downstairs after this, have a quick look around. Before I leave. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Ella. It's been such a pleasure to have you as well.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very honoured.